Hi, everybody. Welcome to the final installment of Samurai Month here on DFOS. Unless we do it again next year, that remains to be seen. Last week,
Oh yeah,
we
then I
talked.
can force you to be the host again, and it'll be so much fun for me just to listen to the solid minute. I always cut it out to the solid minute of Dylan trying to start the podcast prior. It's fun. It's fun for me. For
Yeah.
nobody else, they don't get to enjoy it, but I do, and that's enough.
No. So yeah. So last week or last episode, I should say. You're probably gonna have to post these.
Oh, they're not going to be a week apart. They'll be probably a day or two apart max.
Yeah, because we wound up recording these kind of. Well, we recorded the last one super late, and so if you posted them a week apart, we would be bleeding into April.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
that's not going to happen. They're both going to go up like at the very end of March.
Yeah. So, but
We're
enough.
going to be charging our samurai swords at the fucking beginning of April. Watch out.
Yeah, but enough boring technical talk. Last time on DFOS, we talked about Throne of Blood, the story of a Japanese man running around a dinner party yelling "Piss off, ghost!" And now we're here to discuss.
I feel like if Korg was one of his advisors, it would have gone so much better for him.
It would have. Yeah.
Although the revolution that Korg tried to start, at least the first one, it didn't go well for him either. But maybe because pamphlets are not really a crucial component to Japanese revolutions, Korg would have been in his element.
I just want to see Washizu at the end give Jeff Goldblum's post-credit speech, where he's like, "We've all been a big part of this because you can't have a revolution without someone to overthrow."
See, it's not really Throne of Blood for Jeff Goldblum, it's Throne of Melted Bits.
So, good job, and you're welcome. Have you seen that bit from the Blu-ray, the Team Daryl thing where he moves
I haven't
Earth
gotten the
to
Blu-ray.
Earth?
When I was going to buy it, they were sold out.
Oh, well, you can find it on YouTube.
Guess what? That movie's kind of popular.
You can get it. You can find it on YouTube though. Did you see the Team Thor one that they did where there was that guy named Daryl and like Thor had moved into his flat with him?
That I saw that when like Civil War came out or whenever the hell
Yeah.
they released that.
It's a sequel to that, and his new roommate is Jeff Goldblum.
I saw I saw the one with the Grandmaster too, but I saw that on YouTube.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
I thought it was fun.
That's fucking hilarious. Anyway,
Yeah, no, that whole thing was brilliant. The way he's trying to conquer the world, and it's great. The guy who plays Daryl is just like such a good everyman. You throw him in there with Jeff Goldblum and just magic.
yeah, something about the Office like style of like sitcom like filming works so well with Jeff Goldblum's Grandmaster. Like I don't know, he's just like, this is my melting stick.
Do you think that that's confirmation that he's alive?
I don't know. I don't know how canonical those things are.
No, I know. But Dylan, I'm kind of echoing on your end.
Are you?
Yeah, I don't know how. I know you have headphones in.
Yeah, I don't know what I can do about that. If anything.
I don't hear it anymore. It must have been a weird fluke. It must have been piss off, ghost. Just to keep things consistent. We're talking about Marvel movies again, Dylan.
Yeah, I don't know why we're
talking about samurai movies. That was fine for the Wolverine. They were linked then, but now we're done with all that. We're talking about traditional Japanese.
You're right. I will.
Chanbara. I know terms. I know technical terms.
I will conclude the Marvel movie mini discussion here in the beginning by saying I hope that Jeff Goldblum survived canonically, because I'd love to.
Benicio del Toro to go like, oh, we're related.
Exactly, and I want him to bump into all the others too.
Yeah.
The fucking thinker and the not thinker, contemplator, I think he was called, and the fucking gardener and the champion of the universe. That's what I want in a movie. But anyway, we're here to talk about samurai movies, and the samurai movie for this final installment of Samurai Month 2018 is Harakiri, directed by Masaki Kobayashi, a dark, brooding condemnation / meditation on the nature of the Bushido Code and the dark depths of the human spirit. Also, there's some pretty badass sword fighting in it. Bill, what'd you think of Harakiri?
Yeah, you when we were discussing Throne of Blood, because I hadn't actually watched this yet, you're like, I'm not sure if you're gonna like the next one because you just don't take to depressing things as much. And I thought that was interesting because I'm not saying that you were wrong, but oftentimes it's more when I have to sit through them for like extended periods of time. Like the reason why Breaking Bad was such a not a slog, but it took me a while to get through it was because I had so much of it I had to binge through. I got into it after it was over, so I had all 6 seasons to get through. You know, this was a 2-hour movie, and in that 2-hour period, there is a lot of fucked up shit. Some fucked up shit that I did not expect. Like, levels of fucked up shit that I did not expect. But at no point was I like...
This feels like the fucking Christmas Critter South Park review we did all over again.
But at no point was I like, I'd rather be doing something else, or I don't want to be watching this, because it all felt like in the context of drawing me into the narrative. And this is sort of like, it's a bit of a mystery. It's a story that unfolds incredibly non-linearly. It's almost like the Christopher Nolan equivalent of an old school Japanese samurai movie. It bounces all over the timeline, and I think that mixed in with some really memorable and well-developed characters makes this a damn good movie, to say the least. So I guess we'll say more as we go on. But yeah, no, I liked this a hell of a lot.
That's good. I can't believe we batted 1,000 this month. You liked everything we reviewed.
I expected to pretty much like everything, because you picked from the two big. I know that I was influential in picking Throne of Blood, but we picked from Kurosawa and Kobayashi, and they're the big two. So it's not like we were really looking for crap. Maybe next time you should pick a really bad one, if you even know a bad one. And we can be like, we can wag our finger at it, and it'll be fun. I love wagging my finger at things. We don't do it nearly enough, because you and I always were like, oh, I'd like to rewatch this, and then we pick it, and then we talk about it. And we don't often go like, oh, let's talk about this crap thing, because we don't want to watch it.
Yeah, it's true. Now, one thing I will say that might, for people listening who maybe haven't seen the film, one thing that might turn you off of watching it, if you're a modern moviegoer, as I presume you are, because people in the 1800s can't listen to this.
Oh, really? I'm glad you put that that disclaimer at the beginning, because if we had revealed that later, I feel like we might get in some legal trouble.
Aside from the fact that it is super dark and kind of depressing and doesn't really end in the happiest manner, and for some reason that pisses a lot of people off, the other thing that might turn a modern movie... I
didn't go into this expecting a happy ending at all. If somebody did, they're idiots.
I know, but people, for some reason, there's an entire discussion I could have with you right now over the backlash over the end of Season 5 of Samurai Jack, but seeing as how you haven't seen that yet, and I don't want to derail this podcast anymore, I'll just leave it at saying people fucking hate unhappy endings, and it's bullshit. Anyway, so... point being, aside from all that, the other thing that might turn off a modern moviegoer with modern moviegoer sort of tastes from this film is that it is very, I won't say slow, but deliberately paced. And although, as I said, there is some very good sword fighting action in it, it's all reserved for the last act.
It's not an action movie. We haven't reviewed really action. Well, we had 2 action kind of things at the start, but Throne of Blood and this have like small bits of action in them, surrounded by very slow drama, but not slow in terms of like, oh god, this is never gonna end. Slow in terms of it's like you said, deliberate was a good. It's ponderous is another good adjective for it. We're spending a lot of time thinking over every little action, and everything has a massive significance. And I really thought about how the Japanese communicate emotions and themes a lot while watching this, because it's so different from American movies, you know? And the pacing definitely is a big part of it, but everything is, there is a lot of dialogue. I'm not saying that they're, kind of, like all of their stories is through the action. Because I almost feel like American movies have more of that. There's more of like, oh, there's a close-up on this thing, and that reveals its significance. There's a lot of expository dialogue of, oh, I'm related to this person, and I'm related to this person, and blah, blah, blah. But Japanese movies give you all of what the people are really thinking in their eyes. So that's what a lot of the cinematography is based around. So you can see that in relation to the other person they're talking to, the people they're talking to, if it's a lot of people, or the actual like scene itself, the actual like setting. Yeah, and there's a lot of that, and it's really, really effective. And like I said, I thought a lot about that.
Speaking of communicating emotion through the eyes, that's a nice little segue into the fact that this movie stars Tatsuya Nakadai, who maybe is the fucking best Japanese actor I've ever seen for that. He's almost like a Japanese like Peter Lorre in that way. He has very expressive eyes, and he's fantastic. He's a fucking fantastic actor. And he actually is playing considerably older in this film than he actually was at the time, and does a very good job. I mean,
how old was he at the time when they made this?
I want to say he was only in like his 20s or maybe early 30s or something like that.
He did like an Orson Welles and Citizen Kane kind of thing.
Yeah, let me look it up just to be certain. Let's see.
But he definitely plays older well. I wouldn't have guessed that. Although to be fair,
yeah, he was born in 32, so he would have only been 20 at the time.
Fuck.
So, yeah, he was playing considerably older, because this is a character who's like, late 40s, maybe early 50s.
But it was back in the day, so when people after they turned 15, they all looked 30. You know.
Yeah.
That was just the way things were. If you lived past 15, you looked 30.
He almost pulled like an Ian McDiarmid thing, where Ian McDiarmid was like a young guy playing the fucking ancient emperor, and then he played the younger version when he actually was old.
Right. It's wild shit.
He's good, but everybody is fucking good in it. I don't know if you noticed. I don't remember his name. But like the main guy that he has the sword fight with in like the tall grass, in like that fucking great scene, you might recognize.
I want to say his name was Kawabe. I just watched it today, so some of the names might stick out better in my mind.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, he. I don't know if you noticed, but he is he was in You Only Live Twice. He was the Japanese like intelligence guy. What was it, the Tanaka or whatever?
Tiger Tanaka. That makes a lot of sense. I thought he looked familiar. Yeah. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm sure there are some other notables. I think there's somebody in this movie who was in Ultraman. I'm not sure. But everybody does a great job, I think. The performances are very strong.
Yeah, no, the main guy's fucking... what was his character's name again? Taogo?
Sugumo.
Oh, okay. That was his first name. I'm like, you and I are always trying to remember different parts of their names. But yeah, he was very intense, and as we said, played older very well. And... his character was good, but like I said, I wasn't sure about him at first because I wasn't sure how old he was. I wasn't sure about his deal at all. It's a very slow draw until you finally realize, oh, this is what this movie is. Okay, it takes a while to get there because initially you think like, oh, is it going to be just like the life story of this other guy who we're just kind of hearing about because this guy's doing a similar situation. And then they just pull a series of, rabbits out of the hat, revealing things are more interconnected than anybody would have thought. And
yeah.
it makes all of this dark and depressing shit really kind of fun. Because also, Sugumo was having fun tearing this clan apart from the inside by doing this. At least he is at the end, or I'm sure he's not having fun on the inside, but like at least he's projecting that for his audience's benefit or not benefit, and that translates to the audience. But like I said, all the mystery and intrigue and sudden reveals it keeps the thing going, even though, like you said, it is deliberate and ponderous.
And I'm glad you mentioned Motome is the other character's name, the one
Motome Chijiwa, his name I remember.
who goes through the unfortunate seppuku sequence.
Yeah, he's better known as the Bamboo Samurai.
He is also very good and such a tragic figure in this movie. There are all these stories about when that movie went to Cannes that year, like women having to leave the theater during that scene, and just like
Yeah, it's easily the most gruesome and disturbing scene in the movie.
it's
And
very affecting.
it's not like the only one that's dark and violent. There are a couple of action sequences later on that get pretty intense, but nothing like that.
And very similar though to what Hitchcock pulled off with Psycho, because you walk out of that scene thinking you just saw this horrible, gruesome thing, but when you really think back to it, you didn't see a damn thing. Like it all happens off camera.
Well, you see more than you see in Psycho. To be fair, having just watched it today, you see more of the blade, quote unquote, in his fucking body than you do in Psycho, and a lot more of the blood.
Sure. And you see him like spitting up blood and stuff like that.
There's a lot more. But at the same time, you're right. It's more through the impact of everybody's faces as they're watching it happen. And the fact that they linger on those for so long. That's what makes it so grueling and painful.
It tricks you into thinking you've seen more than you actually have. And I remember the first time that I saw this movie and thinking like, wow, that was so fucking gruesome. And then I watched it the second time. I was like, oh, they actually didn't show as much of it as I thought they did. But it's very affecting. He has to like lay over and like fall on it to get it to penetrate him, because it's bamboo. It won't. He keeps pushing and it's not going through him. He has to like lay down on it to get it to go through, and then and then finally the other guy just takes his head off.
Well, after he bites his own tongue off, and they're like, "Oh, he's cheating."
Yeah.
It was an incredibly disturbing sequence. But because of where it's placed in the movie, I feel like it's more disturbing in retrospect than it is, well, okay, it's disturbing when you're watching as well, but I'm saying, like, because we actually get to know him and he becomes a person later in the movie, to go back to that scene and realize, like, the real brutality and horror and sadness of that, it's really deeply affecting, because in the moment you're just thinking, oh, this poor fuckwit, why would he try this? Like, it went so badly for him. Everybody's a monster. Like, the whole world is terrible. But then, like I said, you see the humanity behind it, and it becomes even more horrible and sad and depressing. If I ever do go back to this movie, that scene will definitely be, I think, even worse. Even though you've cemented for me that you don't see that much, it's just more about, we get to know that guy and the struggles of his life and his family and the relationship to Segumo that who we do get to know and love. So it's very affecting.
That's the other thing. The first time you watch it, I mean, you do feel sorry for him because of what's happening on screen. But at the same time, you're like, well, he was kind of an idiot to try that, and
And we also think he's some kind of like transient criminal. Like, and doesn't that say more about us than it does about him? Like.
But when you actually watch the film in full and you see, the reasons why he was driven to that, in the full context, it's so fucking sad.
Yeah.
He's got a dying baby at home, / dying wife, and it's just a whole thing.
That's one way to describe it. I would love if they do another Blu-ray release of this, because I know Criterion's already done that. But if they do another one, and it's got quotes on the box, I hope they use yours, and it's just a whole thing. Dylan McCann, Super DM64.
It's like a whole thing. Like,
it's the best way to describe it.
I can only, because were you aware of that scene before you watched the movie? I mean,
I knew nothing about this before I knew things about Throne of Blood. I knew nothing about this before I watched it.
Okay, see, I very specifically didn't
know it was about seppuku, and it's not really seppuku. Harakiri is its own thing, but I didn't know that was the deal. When they first introduced the idea of, oh, they're wishing to use our grounds for an honorable death of Harakiri. I was like, oh, it's gonna be like some kind of battle thing with like, oh, the champion of the best samurai of the clan. No, it's not that. I was like I said, I was thinking of it from like a Western point of view. Like if this were like a medieval movie, it was like a knight walking into a castle, like, I want to die an honorable death. Give me your best knight. That's how it would go. But in this,
very,
it's not like that at all.
That's very Norse. You have to die in combat to go to Valhalla.
Right, exactly. But you know, the Japanese are not like that. At least not in this context.
But since we were talking about like the shot composition of that scene and what they show and don't show, you were very taken by Throne of Blood's cinematography and went on about that in the last episode. How did you think? What did you think of the camera work in Harakiri?
It's just as what's the word? Overtly masterful, but in a different way. It feels more indie, feels more gritty, feels more... And I'm not saying that Akira Kurosawa's making fucking fanciful, fucking whimsical Hollywood, glowing kind of stuff, because he's not. His stuff also has a lot of grit to it. But Throne of Blood was different because it had that kind of like otherworldly, old-timey fairy tale kind of feel, just with a lot of blood in it. This feels more real. It feels more down to earth. It feels more real people, and you use the term analytical early on. That's a really good way to describe it. Throne of Blood is, oh, here's a story with samurai in it. This is like a real deconstruction of that concept and telling stories in this kind of universe. Going back to this genre again and again.
Yeah,
we romanticize it. We glorify it. We think that it was so great compared to now. And this movie does a really good job. I was so taken with the kind of metaphor that this problem of Ronin going up to clan houses and begging to commit harakiri, and then they just decide to pay them off as opposed to letting them do it because that would be gross. That's such a great allegory for like any modern political issue, because that was like this era was the start of modern political issues. We're not concerned about going around killing each other anymore. We've all agreed to this veneer of civilization. Now we're all about, abiding by the rules with each other so we all get a fair share of the money and respect.
Yeah, which is interesting because Harakiri is about a point in history where they were transitioning. This is during the time when the Tokugawa shogunate had only recently taken over Japan, and so the sort of warring states period had come to a close, and so many samurai found themselves out of work, and they were ronin now because they weren't needed and they didn't have masters, and it was not a good life for very many of them, and Harakiri is all about that. One reason, I'll say, comparing the two, I definitely like Harakiri more than I like Throne of Blood.
I did too, surprisingly.
Harakiri is also, from what I've seen, my favorite samurai film. So that's, just saying. But
I don't know if I liked it more than Seven Samurai though.
Yeah, see,
I did like it a lot.
The reason being is that thematically, yes, Throne of Blood was very, thematic as well, but it was also just, an adaptation of Shakespeare. So it's like, hey, Macbeth, those are the themes.
Right.
This is very specific to Japan and to Bushido. It is a condemnation of the darker elements of the Bushido code. Masaki Kobayashi's whole thing is about like challenging authority. He didn't return to the samurai genre very often, but the two films of his that I've seen, this and Samurai Rebellion, which we might do if we do another Samurai Month next year, I might have you watch that. Both are very much about like, hey, the Bushido code we kind of romanticize a lot, a la Samurai Jack, to go back to something we reviewed recently.
Even in
but it was
Wolverine.
Even in the Wolverine, we like to to romanticize that a lot, but this is a movie that comes out and say, no, this was really fucked up. Like, let's not let's not idealize this. I really wish that we had a Western equivalent to Harakiri. I wish there was a movie about like knights that came out and
Well,
was like,
they're
hey,
westerns. They're all westerns.
well, no, I mean, I wish there was like a movie, a Western movie that was about like knights where we would go, hey, you know that chivalry thing? It was actually pretty fucking horrible. Like
No,
I wish
I
we
think
had
there
it.
are westerns that are like that. That look at that period and go, it was not exciting, adventurous times. It was hardcore, depressing, horrible shit.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that those movies were made. Were they ones that made a lot of money and like really made an impact? No, but
I can think of
they
more.
were made.
I can think of more examples of that recently. The 2010 remake of True Grit, the Coen brothers remake with Jeff Bridges. I don't know if you saw that, but
I haven't actually, but I've heard good things.
it's very good, and it's sort of like that.
But I mean, that was the approach of Unforgiven. Was to go, you know, we're gonna take this icon of Clint Eastwood in these movies and deconstruct him on a personal level and show him as a broken old man. So I think that those attempts have been made, but a real like a modern one would be really nice. It doesn't have to be a samurai movie, obviously. Like you said, it could be knights. It could be a Western cowboy, you know, lawman, gunfighter, whatever. Could be, you know, a garbage man.
Mm-hmm. There was actually a remake of this movie that was done in Japan a few years back, and I haven't seen it, but from what I've heard,
That's interesting.
from what I've heard, it's not all that good, which is surprising because it's from the guy who I'm pretty sure it's from the guy who made 13 Assassins, which is fucking amazing. Everybody go watch 13 Assassins, by the way.
I wonder if they A, made it more of an action movie, which would be weird, or B, they made it more of like a overly long soap opera kind of drama where you don't care about the characters and it's just forced like, care about this.
I think it may have been one of those cases where it was actually too similar to the original to the point where it was like, what's even the point? And it's just not as affecting, you know, kind of
Right,
what's his
because it
name?
feels like kids putting on a stage play as opposed to you're actually watching a movie with real characters.
Kind of like a Vince Vaughn Psycho situation. I don't know if it's
Right.
that. I don't know if it's that shot for shot, but
God,
I think
I
that
can't even watch that. I've never gotten through that because every time I've tried or I've seen clips, I'm just like it feels like watching an experiment. It feels like this only works watching it like in a little box next to a little box with the original and going, "Oh wow, that's very impressive."
Yeah, yeah,
You know, like I feel like that's the only reason that movie exists.
pretty much. I don't know if that is actually the case with the Harakiri remake. Again, I haven't actually seen it, but from what I understand, that might be the issue. Just from things that I've heard. Point being, don't bother.
Don't make
watch.
movies just to put them in little boxes next to their original counterparts and go, "Ooh, look at how close they are." Because, like you said, what's the point?
I only mention it so that people listening to this review who are like, oh, I want to see this film, don't go out and watch the 2012 version. You want the 1962 original. But do go watch 13 Assassins by that other guy because that is a good movie. It is actually also a remake, I think, but I haven't seen the original in that case. But I can tell you that the remake is very good.
So I mentioned before that the cinematography of this feels more indie. Was the budget and the production more indie than A Throne of Blood? Because Throne of Blood was Toho, so that's not indie. So this is not a Toho movie. Was this more of an independent kind of production? 1962 black and white Japanese movie is not unheard of, but it is more of a thing I would associate with like a lower budget production because you think back to like 1965, they made Gamera, that was black and white, and that's a little late. So I'm just wondering if this was a case like that. Do you know?
I don't really know actually.
Well, fuck, Dylan. No, I only say that it feels more indie in terms of the cinematography because we feel more like we're going, we have this set, we have this set, we have this set. all of the shots built around these sets are going to be super intricate. And like,
I mean, it is a studio film. It's Shochiku, so it's not as big as Toho, but I'm pretty sure it had like a budget, you know.
I'm not saying it didn't have a budget. I'm just saying it didn't have a huge budget.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the budget was in relation to Toho, nor would I even be able to tell you what a big budget was in 1962 in yen. So I don't know, but
But indie also refers to the mindset of the filmmaker, not even necessarily the budget. In terms of, and you already told me that he's trying to rail against authority, and
yeah, he certainly has a much more avant-garde sort of sensibility than say a Kurosawa or
that comes across a lot in the cinematography. These are the movies that you want to go back to in this genre because they're the ones that deconstruct it. They're the ones that stand out because they're the ones that make a statement about it. If you had just picked four run-of-the-mill hack and slash movies from the 60s and 70s, we probably would have been entertained. And maybe we would have even made longer podcasts, like it picking apart individual things that don't make sense. But I definitely wouldn't have enjoyed the experience of going through them as much because the ones that I've seen have something to say about the way we remember this thing, this idea.
Right. That reminds me, we should probably cover Lady Snowblood at some point on this channel. And it wouldn't really be a fit for Samurai Month because it's not actually like a samurai movie. It is period, but it's not about samurai. So we couldn't do it
Japanese
in like the next...
month. Oh wait, most of our stuff is related to that country.
Yeah, good God, that would be way too vague. Japanese year, not
Japanese eternity. God, Michael Crichton's rolling in his grave right now.
Why did he dislike the Japanese?
No, he did. No. He did not dislike the Japanese. He had a problem with America's reliance on Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever.
No, I mean, well, why are we getting into this? If you read his book Rising Sun, he makes a series of very good points about it's a fiction murder mystery, but he gets into a lot of real shit in it about how economically we're a clusterfuck of dumb idiots who don't know what we're doing, and Japan takes advantage of that. So he's against that. So I don't think that's that bad.
Interesting. I've not read that book, but that sounds intriguing.
You should read it.
He made a lot of good points for not cloning extinct animals in Jurassic Park, but damn it, I still want that mammoth.
He did. And listen, I'm gonna still keep watching Dragon Ball, and buying Godzilla movies on Amazon, and watching samurai movies and talking about them with you. But I do think America should be economically independent.
When did he write that book, by the way?
1992. That was
Okay.
He wrote that during the production of the Jurassic Park movie, and then the movie version of Rising Sun came out the same year as Jurassic Park.
If you had
That's got Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes in it, by the way. I've only seen a little bit of it. It seems pretty good.
Interesting. If you had told me that book came out in the 80s, I would have believed you because, well, I mean, I believe you now, but I'm saying that would have made a lot of sense.
Why are you doubting me? I can send you a picture of the audiobook on my phone, you fuck.
No, what I mean to say, if you had told me that book came out in the 80s, that would have made a lot of sense because there was like a wave of like paranoia in the 80s when like a lot more Japanese culture was being imported. There was like a wave of paranoia. It's like,
dude, there was a whole fucking court battle with the U.S. government where they were like, the Japanese had sold some technology to the Russians that they used in their submarines to make them run on silent so they could essentially park like 50 miles outside U.S. waters and just stay there. And the U.S. government was like, maybe we should boycott Japanese products. And then a bunch of American companies were like, yeah, then we can't do any of our business, so you can't do that. So the American government was like, what are we going to do?
The running like paranoia at the time was like in the future, like we were all like the Japan was going to take over and we were all going to be. I mean, you see this all over the place in the area. I mean, it's in Blade Runner. There's all kinds of Japanese like Asian
Blade
shit.
Runner is a good example of it too. I'm sure that Michael Crichton was thinking of Blade Runner when he wrote Rising Sun.
You even see it in Back to the Future Part 2, because Marty's boss is Japanese. You see it in the song. I'm turning Japanese. I think I'm turning Japanese. I really think so.
Think about Batman Beyond. Think about the way Gotham looks in that future.
Batman Beyond. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. And I feel like that still exists in our culture now, but it's kind of
Oh,
shifted a
without
little.
a doubt. I mean, Blade Runner 2049.
But I think it's shifted a little bit more to China in recent years. But
Yes, yes, like your Pacific Rims.
because Japan's fucking population is dying because they're not having sex. They're like pandas, and China and China's like.
China with the real pandas is having lots of sex now.
Meanwhile, China is
They're
multiplying.
they're getting rid of that law that says you can
Meanwhile,
only have one kid.
yeah. Meanwhile, China is multiplying like Catholic rabbits, and they're doing all of the science. So
Yeah, and they're breeding mammoths. Like we're just gonna be conquered by a fucking stream of mammoth riding Chinamen.
they're all gonna know kung fu. So we're
It's
fucked.
gonna be so wild. Wait, are we talking about the mammoths or the Chinamen?
Both.
Oh my
You don't think they're gonna genetically breed mammoths and not teach them kung fu?
I mean, why don't they just genetically breed them with the kung fu built in? Why do they have to teach it to them?
You think we have any shot against a fucking army of genetically enhanced
What
Donnie Yins?
What if we taught a I almost said teached. What if we taught a elephant like American boxing, so that and we can have like a Rocky versus like Bruce Lee style situation, but with elephants.
You know, I sometimes wonder if the Japanese noticed that whole thing I was talking about us being like paranoid about them taking over, because
Are you fucking crazy? Of course they knew. They just knew that we wouldn't do anything about it.
because I feel like they were poking fun at it in '91 with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, because
Yeah.
the whole plot of that movie is like
What is the plot of that movie? A bunch of white people trying to sabotage Japan from taking over the world.
white people from the future coming back in time to kill all the Japanese
The
people.
white people destroying the only line of defense Japan has against outside forces. The symbol of Japanese like kind of, because Godzilla is like one of the biggest imports Japan's ever produced. Exports. Excuse me, I'm an idiot. So, it's very symbolic. But it doesn't really have much to do with cutting out your own bowels in front of a bunch of other people.
It doesn't. So let's get back into Harakiri. God damn it. The
It's
Throne
all
of
right.
Blood
At least that was connected to what we were talking about.
It was very Japanese.
Oh God, we're turning Japanese.
What'd you think about trying to think of another thing about how about the score here? They use a lot of very traditional Japanese instrumentation that
That didn't strike me as all that different from Throne of Blood. It's a little more like intense, and it comes in and out at more like random moments where you're like, oh, I didn't expect there to be music there. But it's the traditional Japanese. I mean, because like they're all trying to capture a similar period, so I guess the music can't be that different. It's like when you watch a bunch of like Victorian era London movies in a row, they all kind of sound the same, because it would be weird if they didn't.
Yeah, or like all those pretty much any horror movie from the 1930s. People are watching or when people are like walking down the street and it's all dark and there's just like the strings in the background going, like that kind of shit.
There's different like just kind of like soundtracks of the period that define it.
There's I've heard it referred to as like Mickey Mousing, when like old movie scores would like they would always play when people were walking for some reason. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like they were scoring to the people's movements instead of like what was going on or the emotion or whatever.
Right. It's just action-based music, and we see it a lot in modern movies. There's a lot more, kind of fine-tuned going. All right, this happens here, so the music's going to do this.
But
I did like the score, but it didn't jump out at me as anything spectacular.
True. I don't think we discussed Throne of Blood score in a review of that film, though. So
I feel like maybe we did a little bit. I know we talked about that opening song, that catchy number about the ruins.
Oh yes, the ruins. Who can forget the ruins? All right, so
there were some songs in this too. Some catchy numbers.
There's a lot of great symbolism too in the movie, specifically centered around that suit of armor that exists at the house at the Lee clan's house. Um, because again, the entire movie is about Bushido, and how Bushido bad as a caveman version of Masaki Kobayashi might say. Um,
And I mean, I think it's supposed to be more complicated than that. You know,
a bit, but but they
I
certainly
feel like
they,
that's kind of the point of this movie is that these issues are super complicated.
but they don't. But it doesn't illustrate very many of the good points. Point being, the suit kind of represents all of that, and so at the end of the movie, when Tatsuya
Well,
Nakadai,
it represents like the untouched perfection that samurai-dom isn't.
yeah, so at the end of the movie when Tatsuya Nakadai like picks up the armor and drops it on the floor and does all that, does what he does. Um, it's him like besmirching this thing that everybody is so has such a boner for this code, especially in this house. They're very strict about it. It's him. I mean, it's basically a visual interpretation of what he had said moments before in the courtyard, where he talks about how it's all like an act and all that shit. And then at the end of the movie, when they're cleaning the house up and they prop the armor back up, because in the end he really has won, despite the fact that he's fucking dead, because he has besmirched.
He did what he said he was gonna do. He didn't lie. He just did it in the most badass, counterintuitive, fuck you way possible.
Yeah, he has besmirched this house's honor, and even if nobody else in the world ever knows about it, but the people in that house, he's succeeded in having his personal revenge. So that's
The idea at the end seems to be that it's gonna get out when they find that lock of hair. That was the impression I got. Maybe I'm wrong, because it seems like that somebody would find that and go, "Oh, this guy lost his top knot." So then that whole clan comes into question, and then somebody starts asking questions. And I think the foreshadowing for that kind of deal, there's so much gossip throughout this whole movie. Like early on, Sugomo and Shijiwa are talking about like, oh, this fucking Ronin showed up at this clan and said he was gonna commit harakiri if he didn't get money or whatever. I don't, which isn't exactly how it went down. But point is, they're gossiping.
no.
So I feel
What
like,
happened was
I know. I'm just my point is that they were gossiping. So I think that's how it might spread over time.
Yes, well, I don't know that you know, but I don't know if everybody listening knows.
So yeah, break it down.
What happened was, as I mentioned, this takes place in that period of history. The shogun's taken over. There's no more war. The samurai aren't really needed. A lot of cutbacks in the samurai budget. A lot of people being laid off, for lack of a better word. A lot of Ronin roaming the countryside. So what had happened was this one well-intentioned samurai who actually did intend to commit harakiri, as far as anybody knows, showed up to a house somewhere and asked to use their courtyard to perform harakiri, honorable death. And the people in charge of that house had decided, because of his show of honor and his commitment to the code, they had actually, instead of allowing him to kill himself, they had actually given him like a position there. They had given him a job. And so then a bunch of other much less well-intentioned Ronin throughout the countryside started doing the same exact fucking thing, as if it wasn't fucking obvious, showing up to people's houses, wanting to perform harakiri. And in a lot of cases, the houses wouldn't hire them, but they would like give them some money just to get them to go away. And so
Right.
this became like a thing.
Because nobody wants them to really do it.
Right.
Because
And so,
it's just then they have to clean it up. Like
yeah. So this just becomes a thing. There's just a rash of desperate people going around pretending that they're going to kill themselves to get money. The Lee clan, however, is not willing to give someone money to get them to go away. They're so staunch in their devotion to the Bushido code that if somebody shows up to their house saying that they're going to perform harakiri, then goddamn it, they're going to perform harakiri. And so when Motome Chijiwa shows up because again, dying wife and baby at home. When he shows up to try and pull this scam out of sheer desperation, because just earlier on in the movie, he was talking about how fucking like disgusting it was, and that like people who were doing it should be ashamed. But again, desperate times, desperate measures. He shows up to try and do this, and they force him to commit harakiri. The unfortunate twist being, and we discussed this earlier, but we didn't really explain it. He had already pawned his real swords and gotten blades made out of bamboo, which is a huge dishonor in and of itself. And then they actually, instead of providing him a real sword to cut himself open with, force him to use his bamboo blades to cut himself open, which is a very long, laborious, brutal death. Torturous is another adjective that I have not yet used. Torturous.
I think I've heard this movie referenced before, that scene in particular. Because the idea of killing yourself with bamboo is something I've heard as like a common turn of phrase. As like this is about as hard as trying to kill yourself with bamboo. You know?
Huh. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever heard that, but I don't know.
It's
maybe.
a fucked up turn of phrase. I don't know where I heard it, but I have. So this must be where that comes from.
I would assume.
This wasn't based on like a real event, right? There wasn't a guy who actually killed himself with bamboo in Japan. In these,
as far as I know, no. I would like to know whether that whole story about the Ronin who showed up to the house to commit harakiri and wound up getting a job, I would like to know whether or not that was real, and like the whole thing about other people running around replicating it to get money. I would like to know if all of that was true, because again, the historical basis for the movie, the whole thing about like the shoguns taking over and then there not being any jobs for these out-of-work samurai, that's all very real. So I would like to know if that part of the setup was real as well. I don't know, though. So
I wonder what issue at the time when this was made in 1962 Kobayashi was commenting on. Because there's more to this movie than him criticizing the samurai in general. Because that code is a larger, like, kind of way of defending the core problems of society at large. And I think that's more of what he's getting at. And I think that there's a modern political issue that you and I aren't picking up on because we're not Japanese people in 1962 that would be potential Ronin are showing up at different clans and threatening to commit, or not threatening, but claiming they want to use their grounds to commit harakiri. And, like, what do you do in that situation? Where you have somebody asking for something that seems like honorable and out of, benevolent good intentions, and then they might do something really, like, kind of bad with it, depending on how you react. Just putting you as a person in power in an awkward situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't know if there was any actual political incidents at the time that he may have been referencing.
We can think of a million modern equivalents. Think of any welfare issue now,
or rather the guy who wrote the movie, if maybe he had something like that in mind.
You know what else this reminds me of? This reminds me of John Q. This is almost like it's a Japanese samurai John Q.
I do know, however, that as I alluded to before, he's all about like challenging like just authority in general, and I feel like Bushido is kind of the ultimate like sort of symbol of that, and so that it might just be that simple. I believe that he had spent some time in the military, and that's where like all of this like hatred of authority comes from. His big trilogy, The Human Condition, which I still haven't seen, is apparently all about that sort of thing.
It could. He could be creating a metaphor for modern soldiers who don't have a war to fight anymore, and they're home and they've got no work. And think about like Rambo, and what happens what happens to those guys.
This could be Japanese Rambo, and I'll tell you, I would be so down for that, because that's a fucking amazing movie.
Yeah. But it's a similar issue, just in a different context. These guys, they go over there, they serve their duty, they come home, and then they're met with no thanks, no job, everybody hates them, and the government isn't going to do shit for them because they're done. They don't work for the government anymore. They've done their part, and the government should owe them nothing else because they did their duty. That's essentially. I mean, with the samurai, it's even worse because their clans are destroyed, so they have nobody to fall back on at all, except themselves and the fact that they have a fucking sword. I mean, and then you think about like an American soldier; they didn't even get to keep their guns.
Right.
So a little bit of gun humor for you, always appropriate in this day and age.
Oh yeah, no reason that there would be any backlash to gun humor at the moment.
But I definitely sat there wondering what modern political issue pissed him off where he felt that he had to create this exaggerated version of it to go, what are we sitting in our parliament or in our diet building arguing about that either we shouldn't or we are, and we're going to react to it in the wrong way because we all have self-serving capitalistic interests, or we're trying to self-serve some stupid traditionalist nonsense that doesn't matter anymore, and it's to the chagrin of many people who are going to suffer for it.
I don't know.
If somebody does know, like Sean Barry, he knows a lot about this stuff. If somebody does know what made Kobayashi so mad, I'd love to know what it was. Because like I said, I can think of a million modern equivalents, any kind of modern medical insurance problem, any kind of modern welfare problem.
Yeah, I've got the Criterion Blu-ray,
even illegal immigration in a way. I can kind of think of it as a kind of modern proxy for this kind of issue.
I've got the Criterion Blu-ray, and there was something on there where the guy who wrote the movie talked about what had like inspired him to write the movie, but I don't remember exactly what it was. I know he had always wanted to write something that was centered around the idea of seppuku, and then he just finally put together a story that would allow him to do that. But I don't remember if there was any like specific thing that they were like riffing on.
How do Japanese ratings work? Do they have a rating system? By the way, I have had to do research in this kind of stuff before for different papers that I wrote in college and high school, and it has all left my memory. So I should know this kind of stuff, and it's just gone. So that's one thing I'm wondering about because I wonder what this was rated. Who was allowed to see this? Everybody.
The other question is if they do have a rating system, I wonder if it was in place at the time, because Japanese. Their film industry had sort of a weird, like, it was almost parallel to the way that our film industry developed, but it was like behind. So like they were doing like the shit we were doing in the 30s with like studios basically owning people. They were doing that in like the 50s and 60s. So it would be interesting if they were still in some sort of like a pre-code type of thing at the time. I don't know.
I want to know what this was rated because, like you said, there is gore. But it is more about the impact of it more than what we actually see. So I wonder if it's almost like a Dark Knight situation where you almost feel like because of the themes it should be rated R, but there's nothing in the movie that actually makes it necessary to rate that an R.
Okay, so I found through the internet they do have a rating system. Apparently it was established in 1949, and it was one of the things that we forced on them post-World War II.
That makes a lot of sense, and you know what? I'm pretty sure I had researched that fact in a prior point in my life when I didn't smoke weed.
Right.
So I wonder what this was rated. That's my question. Was this like 14 over? I imagine it would probably be something like that.
But see, the ratings that I'm looking at here were introduced in '98, so the system must have been different at the time. So I don't know. I don't know what it would have been. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of speculation here about like what they might have been trying to say with the movie. But what I hope comes through,
in a way, is that's all talking about movies is.
In a way, so obviously this is all speculation. We don't know what they were actually trying to say. But what I hope comes through this conversation for everyone listening is that this is an incredibly thoughtful movie. In like I brought up Blade Runner earlier. It's kind of similar to Blade Runner in that way. It really makes you think. And so if you're into movies that make you think, which is maybe 10% of you, that should be another reason to see it. Um, what I guess we could talk about the actual, because one thing you were talking about in regards to Throne of Blood that you were perhaps a little disappointed in was that there was no real sword action to speak of. There is a
Yeah,
bit of sword.
that was another. I mean, that was probably the whole reason why I liked this better. No,
There is quite a bit
that
of
was a
sword fighting.
big discrepancy though. There is quite a bit. Yeah.
It's all in the last act, as I said before, when he's describing how he went around, taking out their best sword people, and then he has a huge fight against everybody in the house, pretty much. What'd you think of all that?
It was definitely worth going through the more conniving plotting of Throne of Blood to wait for this kind of glorious tour de force of gritty sword action. It was awesome.
It's also super satisfying to see him kick those people's ass.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost similar. It kind of reminds me of in Kill Bill Volume 1, the fight against the Crazy 88.
I thought of Kill Bill as well, watching that bit.
But what about the one-on-one fight between him and?
I also thought of like Django. Speaking of Tarantino, Django, when he just starts gunning those guys down in the plantation.
Oh yeah, in the house, yeah. That's also a really good scene. What about the one-on-one fight between him and Tiger Talk? Even though his name wasn't Tiger Talk in the movie.
I got mad Kylo Ren, Luke Skywalker, End of the Last Jedi vibes from that.
Interesting.
I wonder if Rian Johnson watched this movie because like it was a lot. I'm not even talking about like because it wasn't really a fight in the Last Jedi, but the way the movements kind of go, it feels very similar.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched. I wouldn't be able to say whether or not you watched this or not, but I did walk out of Last Jedi thinking it was that the sword fighting was very samurai, in a way that we haven't really seen, before. I think it might have just been him riffing on like the way samurai movie, like in general, the way that their fights go. Probably taking it back to the roots of the original movie being inspired by Hidden Fortress. But
I
yeah,
love. I love that kind of thoughtfulness, and I think that it was a good decision because it's such a. And I can see why people don't like it. It's very deliberate. There's not a whole lot of fast-paced, like, it's a whole lot of walking around and picking your times to strike. It's almost like watching, if you've ever watched snakes fight, it's how snakes fight. They kind of circle each other and then they go in for quick jabs and then they tangle for a few seconds and then they back off.
Yeah.
The confrontations are short, but they're intense, and that's immensely satisfying and immensely dramatic because you're constantly going, ooh, ooh, ooh. That like just these little tiny moments decide the fate of the characters. And in that last scene, you just see this guy who we've been getting to know through the whole movie just get cut down slowly and painfully. It's very effective.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's not often that you find a movie that can be both super thought-provoking and everything that we were talking about before, very cerebral, but also be a satisfying like movie on like an action level. Not an action movie because again, there's not that much.
I don't know if there's enough of it to say that.
It's not. Again, it's not an action movie because not a big enough percentage of the film consists of action for it to be an action movie. But the action that is presented is super satisfying, and so
I don't think
it's a movie.
It's a reason to see it on its own, though.
No, but it is a movie where both are done very well, and so you get to have your cake and eat it too.
Without a doubt. But
which is the
it's
only
definitely action that's there to serve story, as opposed to Kobayashi going, "God damn it, I want to do some kick-ass sword fighting."
Which slight tangent about the weird things we say in the English language. Having your cake and eating it too. The only practical way to have your cake.
I've never understood that expression. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why we say it. I say it because that's the way we express that idea.
Exactly. But yeah,
it's what I think you can criticize with this fighting is that sometimes you can't see what the characters are really doing that's hurting the other person, because the camera can't get close enough to them to show it. Because they'll grab each other in a way, and you're like, oh, they just kind of seem to be grappling. But in reality, they're trying to stop the other one from grabbing their other sword, because samurai always carry two swords.
They're also being very careful because, I mentioned in Throne of Blood about how all the arrows except for that one trick arrow were real arrows. Again, in this movie, all real samurai swords. So there's a lot of
Except for even the bamboo one, huh?
So there's a lot of very carefully, God, I hope I don't accidentally cut my own fucking head off going on here. But I think that only makes the action more intense. Mm-hmm. The fact that the actor is in real distress. And nobody except maybe crazy Tom Cruise would ever do that today. So
there were a few moments where I got vibes of like Mission Impossible 2, that knife going close to his eye. When they're getting the swords really close to each other. I mean, that whole last action scene, there's so many people swinging swords at him at once that, he could have gotten dinged had he not been like accurate at dodging. It might as well have been a real fucking sword fight, like just he was really having to dodge those blades, Yeah.
And
the people weren't really trying to hit him, to be fair. But he didn't know necessarily where exactly they were going to end up striking. So he had to keep his wits about him. It's very impressive. You were speaking of symbols. I'll mention one that struck me in that sequence in particular. When he does get eventually hit, and I don't even know if it's his blood, but there's blood that hits on his hand, and he gets backed into a corner, and that corner happens to be the entryway into like the council chamber, and it has the... It's the Lee clan?
Yeah, Lyi is how it's spelled in the subtitles. So it's like Lee. I think it's like a sound that English-speaking tongues might have a little difficulty making. It's like a Lee, It's a repeated E sound, I think, is how it's supposed to be pronounced.
Mm-hmm. So, the symbol there is not necessarily subtle. He is tainting the otherwise taintless symbol that is this clan. However,
and unlike in Throne of Blood, where we're given a room soaked in blood and told what it's meant to represent, we get to see the blood being put on the wall.
But what I think is deeper about it is that it's specifically his blood and his family's blood that's tainting their image, and that is what will be hard to scrub out in history. Is the actual loss of life that occurred. That child's life, his daughter's life. Can I mention one of the only things that I had a problem with in this whole movie? Now that I've mentioned his daughter, Miho.
Sure.
She's really underdeveloped because she kind of gets introduced as like a major plot element, and then in terms of the fact of like, oh, this girl is in love with this guy, and then we realize that it's his daughter, and we're like, okay, so that's the connection there. And she doesn't really get to do a whole lot of speaking. We know that obviously she works hard and everything.
That's feudal Japan for you.
No, I understand. I understand it's probably a lot of cultural stuff, but I almost wish we could have just spent more time with her before she got sick. It happens so quick in the narrative, and it's probably just because of the way things are left, where she's dead when the movie actually starts, so she's kind of hard to develop, but she feels a little bit like a plot device.
I can see where you would have that problem, especially right after reviewing Throne of Blood, in which there's a very
Asagi is such a fucking like powerhouse in that movie, and I understand that they're distinctly different characters, but I almost just wish I knew more about Miho. I know that she makes fans, like that, and I know that she, works hard to help her family out. But there's a lot of talking about her between other characters, and not so much really seeing her. And like I said, I understand cultural differences and differences in the time, but it bugged me. I wanted to know her better because she was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Or at least just see her more.
It's very fortunate for her that she was in love with Motome, because her dad kind of just sort of threw that at them so that she wouldn't have to get married to like that, or she wouldn't have to be out of that.
He was the only dude that it seemed like she had time to know, so it didn't really seem like she had options.
Right. Well, if you remember, there was somebody who had offered to have her adopted into like a bigger family, but her dad turned it
Well,
down
yeah, because she would have been a fucking concubine.
yeah, and that's why he went to Motome and was like, "You need to marry my daughter."
He was
uh,
like, bro, I can't even like marry myself. Please marry my daughter. All right,
I guess.
if I must, if you're gonna force me, if you're gonna force us. Um, that actual marriage ceremony is one of those really nice kind of symbolic moments because you're sitting there going, I know that this is just how Japanese weddings at the time probably progressed, but there's like 4 people in the room. Nobody looks like they want to be there. And they're listening to this really depressing... It sounds like a really depressing song, but the lyrics are all about like peace and happiness and love. But it's like Christian music. It sounds like just the most horrible, like emotionless, draining stuff, even though it's just preaching about how great everything is, you know?
Yeah.
It's a really great like bittersweet kind of symbol of we're trying to make the best of a really bad situation, you know? And of course, they have this time where they're all really happy when the kid's first born. And I really liked that little bit of seeing all these characters at like the height of their happiness, because that gives you a far greater 3-dimensional picture of who they are. You get nothing like that in Throne of Blood, you know. Like there's no moment where we're like, oh, well, Shizu is like he's in good spirits, he's having a good time. No, he's always fucking contemplating his potential death.
And it definitely could have benefited from that. Actually, Throne of Blood could have benefited from maybe a flashback
It's
at some
not like
point. Where
Macbeth has that though.
It's true. It's true.
It's not like Shakespeare was like, I want to make you like this guy because he's gonna have positive feelings about something.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a guy sitting in a dark room going, I wonder what I'm going to do next. I wonder what's going to happen.
But if they had wanted to like better develop like I don't know the friendship between him and Mickey or something like that, something
I
along
would
those
have
lines.
liked it. I like that stuff inherently, but I don't think that's what Kurosawa was going for.
No, it's not what Shakespeare was going for, and Kurosawa was, after all, adapting Shakespeare.
You could say so.
You could. It would be the right thing to say.
Right.
That's like saying you could say the Earth is round.
I just love when we do that where we're like, oh yeah, you could say that. It's like I did.
I didn't.
You can't stop me.
I could, and I did.
It's like in Fresh Prince, talking about hitting on girls. Will is like, they say those who can't teach and those who can do and those who can't teach. Well, I can and I do. Love it. That's how I feel about Samurai.
This may be the only time that the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air has been brought up in a review of Harakiri.
But it's about time. I feel
like we've broken new ground in the cinematic discussion.
For some reason, Michael Crichton's rolling in his grave again. I don't know why he cares. Michael Crichton's he's doing a lot of rolling today. He's doing a lot of orbits.
Ever since they started calling that Mammoth Man, he's just a fucking turbine.
Oh man! Every time an airplane crashes, every time somebody's like, "Oh, I wonder if we're gonna find aliens." Anytime, like just any kind of science fiction thing he speculated on, is mentioned, he just spins over. I told you already, it was his bad idea.
Anytime we teach a gorilla sign language.
Yep. Yeah. That actually went pretty well for those characters. They benefited from that. Dickhead. Read the book, dummy.
Oh, so that book had Pierre Boulle spinning in his grave.
Yes. People still died, though.
That's another one that I've never understood. Well, why is the expression of dead people who are angry about things spinning? Why is that the way that they choose to express their displeasure at whatever's going on in the living world?
I feel like it has something to do with slot machines. No, I have no idea. I mean, think about this. Why do we put dead people in a box and then put the box in the ground? Why even put them in the box then? Right?
because we want them to.
I'm asking all kinds of deep questions.
Well, the whole idea is that it prevents them from decaying. It doesn't prevent them from
Does it
decaying.
though? It doesn't.
It only slows the process down quite a bit. But whatever we can do.
True, you're right. You're right. I've buried cats. And I didn't just put like their dead bodies in the ground. Like I put them in a box. I'm not a monster. Not about that anyway. In the bedroom, woo!
I put my that could be interpreted in so many different ways.
Good. Let them interpret them in each one individually.
Some of them are frightening.
I hope they're all frightening. That was my intent.
So Harakiri.
Oh yeah.
The story of a man who probably wasn't buried in a box.
He probably wasn't buried at all. He was probably fucking fed to dogs.
Probably dumped in the field out back.
So sad, but true.
I wish that was the last image of the movie. That would be such a perfect just cap to his life story.
It's like that guy in Quantum of Solace, Rene Mathis. He gets fucking thrown in the dumpster, and Bond is like, he would have wanted it like this. And I'm like, would he have? Like, I don't know.
Because another thing I really like about this movie is that we get to see him like, before his clan got, destroyed, and he was like out just fucking talking to Motome's dad, who was his friend, and he's like shooting arrows and just, just being a leisurely man about town. And then he goes all the way from that to just destitution, and then his entire family dies, and then he becomes the fucking murder machine. Like
I love that. Well, I don't love it, but I mean that's a weird way to put it. I think that it's really good foreshadowing. That's not even foreshadowing. It's just thematically well structured that Chijiwa's dad commits seppuku as well, and then Suguma's old lord also does, because it creates this precedent of doing it can have honor, even though, like we said earlier, it oftentimes ends up just fucking over everybody else who's alive, and it is kind of cowardly. So,
yeah, I'm glad that we did get to see some examples of proper, honorable seppuku in the film, though, and it's not just all, crazy back room, fucking. Like,
in a way, you can interpret that as it's the death of what little bit of honor, the Bushido Code has left,
Yeah, well, I think it's a way of saying, like, this is how this is supposed to look, and then you contrast that with, the way that Motome's death plays out, which is like, just a bunch of, like, political machinations and, like, backroom, like, they're almost like a board meeting when they're talking about, like, what are we going to do with this guy?
Right.
And then somebody's like, I vote we kill him.
Well, they're making it a fucking spectacle. That's what they're doing. They're making it a show, as opposed to just going, well, let's do it the right way.
Yeah. I mean, really, they could have just said, get the fuck out of here.
They could have, but no, they want to make it a show.
Mm-hmm. So, well, what did you think of what did you think of this sort of almost Arabian Nights type of structure, where he's basically forcing them all to listen to his story, and all of the antics of him like stalling for time, which is
that's another cultural thing. I feel like in America, you might watch this and go like, oh, they would never listen to him tell that story, but they would have in the real world. I feel like.
Yeah.
At that time, there was this kind of verbal honor code that I don't feel like people today understand.
Well, and it's also just a matter of, hey, we're waiting on these other guys to get here, and we don't have cell phones.
That's the crucial thing, is nobody had phones to look at, man. So there was a lot more of like this. Yeah, I'll listen to you talk. Fine, go ahead and ramble. Imagine if people still did that today, just listen to other people ramble about a topic that really doesn't pertain to anything crucial to their survival. Imagine that.
No, skip ahead to the 1970s, and that poor, or no, 1980 actually, and that poor guy in Airplane can't even tell his life story without the guy next to him lighting himself on fire. Uh,
Natural reaction.
or the old woman who hangs herself. He comes back from his flashback and she's just swinging. I love that movie. Um, and how long have we gone so far?
We're over an hour, so I mean, yeah, whatever. I mean, whenever you want to wrap up.
Yeah,
But I feel like you were trying to make a point. So if you want to
was
wrap
I?
up on that, oh, well, I mean, you brought up the fact that they turned this guy's death into like a boardroom scene, but not like the boardroom scene from Spider-Man where Norman Osborn showed up and killed them all.
No, no.
More like the boardroom scene from.
That would have been interesting if Norman Osborn had shown up in, fucking whatever year this was, Japan.
I feel like it was more like the boardroom scene from RoboCop where Ed 209 rolled in and just shot that guy brutally. That was the equivalent of the bamboo scene.
You have 15 seconds to comply. No, all I was mentioning when I talked about how it was almost like a boardroom scene was, and that was just that was when I was talking about the point of how you contrast the way that all played out with like the way his dad and their former lords seppuku had played out, in the very sort of just quiet, honorable way that it's intended.
As you said earlier, I think we've evoked well that this is a movie with a thinking cap on, and you better put yours on if you're gonna get the most out of it.
Yeah,
if you just sit there and turn your brain off, you ain't gonna get nothing out of it. You're gonna be sitting there watching people stare at each other for 2 hours. You have to get into it, and I definitely think it's worth getting into, to say the least.
Were you prepared for that when you walked in?
I knew you adequately warned me, and I mean, whenever I watch something subtitled,
you told me that you didn't know that it was you didn't know that much about it going in, and I was very careful about not spoiling specific things. So I wasn't sure if you went in knowing that like, oh, I need to be prepared for a very thoughtful.
Hey man, I went to film school. I fucking know. I can watch films and analyze them. But more than that, whenever I watch a subtitled movie, you gotta pay the fuck attention. Otherwise, what else are you doing? I mean, Godzilla, it can sometimes be different. But if I'm gonna put a Godzilla movie on and not watch it, I'll just or like not pay attention to it. I'll put the dub on. If I'm watching a movie subtitle, I usually am in for the long haul and actually paying attention to the words on the screen. So, I have my thinking cap on. Don't you worry.
That's good. It's good.
And I definitely enjoyed doing that. It was definitely not a chore.
So let's say we talked about the performances. We talked about the directing, the cinematography, the plot a little. I guess there's really not that much more to say. So I guess we should wrap up here. Would recommend this. I guess what we've been saying.
Would recommend that you don't commit harakiri while watching, because it's worth seeing till the end.
Indeed. Wait until afterwards.
Watch the movie and then decide if you want to commit harakiri afterwards. I feel like you'll be much more well informed.
Exactly.
You definitely won't try this scam. We'll say that. Definitely not with a bamboo sword.
It might actually educate you on just how involved harakiri always is. Because usually when you watch the movies and people perform seppuku, they just put the sword through themselves and they slump over dead. And you think, oh, that's not that bad. No, they explain it in much greater detail in this. You make like a slash across your stomach. You go in and then you just like cut your insides all the pieces. And that means there's just like shit from your intestines just bleeding out into your stomach cavity like it's gnarly, and then some other guy standing there as you're sitting there screaming in agony, by the way, because that is not a quick death as it's often portrayed. You're gonna be fucking you're gonna be in a little bit of pain there. There's a second guy standing off to your side, waiting until you've finished that so that he can then cut your head off and
put you out of your misery
and help you out. Help a man when he's down.
Yeah, exactly. Do you a real solid by cutting off your head.
Yeah.
Like a bro,
That's the real test of friendship. Whether or not you would cut off your friend's head while he was performing harakiri.
I'd do it for you, man.
rather than talking them out of it, which might be the best
No,
course of action.
there's no honor in that. I would just be like, oh no, man, I'm here for you. I got my sword ready. There's no honor in trying to talk your friend out of trying to commit harakiri. That's not what real bros do. Real bros just stand there and have their sword ready.
I don't know if anybody's ever reviewed this movie and had this many jokes.
I feel like we've done the best job by doing that. Like, all the other guys are like, fuck, we've screwed up. We should have put more jokes about fucking the Terminator and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed Samurai Month here on the Demons from Outer Space. If let us know. We might do this again.
I think we definitely will. I mean, I definitely enjoyed delving into this genre more, and there's so much more of it to cover.
There is.
Definitely
We have only scratched the surface.
We have only taken a bamboo pole to our stomachs.
Right, which is probably the best place to take a bamboo pole, given the alternatives.
Nowadays, the equivalent to that is a bamboo Tide Pod, you know? That's the modern day seppuku.
I suppose. But less honorable and just sort of dumb.
Yeah, you know what? I guess it's more of like the modern day equivalent of having your top knot cut off, because you might not die, but it's mad. Like, nobody will ever take you seriously again.
Right. It's like when you commit suicide and you attempt to and you fail, and then everybody's like, I couldn't even do that right.
It was the guy who jumped off the bridge, and he survived, and afterwards he said halfway down he realized it was a bad idea.
What about that joke that Bill Burr tells about the guy who jumped out of the helicopter?
And it's from the pilot's perspective, and he's just rambling on and on. He turns around, and the guy's like halfway out, and he's like, "No!"
Hey, if you look out your window, you'll see. Hey, buddy, put your seatbelt back on. And no. But the great part about that story is this guy was dying and decided he was going to go out on his own terms. He was a fucking hero, and then he hit the water and lived.
That's always the worst. Oh man.
So if you're gonna commit suicide, be more thorough, I guess. Is the message?
Is that the message of this movie? Thorough suicide?
It's not the message of this movie, but it's my message.
Is that the message of this podcast that you've hosted, Dylan?
It is.
I'm really glad I have this on my channel now. Thanks.
You don't make me host a thing and not expect it to go to some dark places.
For it to not advertise suicide.
Yeah, you knew what you were buying into. So
I did when I got that first message from you in like 2012 asking me if it would be cool if you wrote the Godzilla gang. I knew all the way back then.
Did you? That's a very vague.
I got a psychic sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm glad.
I'd never gotten one before until that moment, and I was like, "Fuck."
That's good.
Now I know.
That's good. That's good, because if you got that psychic sense and didn't run in the other direction, then that's...
Yeah, it's great that I was like, I'll go full into this. I was just like Captain Gordon and go right into it. You know? That's how my outlook on life.
So anyway, this has been Samurai Month on Demons from Outer Space. Next week, Bill will be hosting again, so it'll be far more professional. I promise.
I feel like that's wildly inaccurate, but thank you. I feel like we should discuss this on the air. We have two options. We either do another Science Week, or we talk about Super, because we're all caught up. It's done now. We might as well. So those are your two options, D. You pick.
I think we should probably do Super and finish that.
I feel like we should as well. I only asked because you just did a video on it, so I thought you might be sick of it already. But I would like to do a video on it. So
I did do that video on it, but I didn't talk about the finale in that video because I recorded it pre-finale, so that will be all new information for the listeners who definitely don't care. So
right.
Tune in for that, and then the week after that we'll probably do a Science Week.
Then we'll do a Science Week because it's been a while. Yeah.
or maybe do that Incredible Hulk thing that we meant to do before.
And
but
then we'll do the Incredible Hulk. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And then after
I
that,
finally know what episodes I want to do.
and then after that, fucking Infinity War will probably be out, and then that'll be all we'll fucking be ranting about for months upon months. So get ready for all that.
Well, I mean, then there's a Jurassic Park movie coming out, so that's another thing we'll have to rant about for a while.
Oh yeah, that's true. There's also a Predator movie coming out
There's
this
a Predator
year,
movie coming out too.
and I found out somebody was in that yesterday, and it fucking like made me happy. Who?
Boyd
Oh,
Holbrook from Logan.
yeah. Boyd Holbrook is in that movie.
I mean, dude, I think it's Michael Key. Michael Key's in it.
Yeah, Keegan-Michael Key is also in the movie, so that's gonna be interesting.
That's gonna be amazing.
Also, I realized that there was a reason when I watched Logan, I thought Boyd Holbrook looked familiar, and that was because he was in the award-winning History Channel miniseries Hatfields and McCoys, which is very good for anybody who hasn't
I
seen it.
remember
You
when
should
my
also-
dad watched that.
It's a very good fucking miniseries. And it's also not that long as far as miniseries go. It's only 2 parts. So,
Bill Paxton, man, rest in peace.
Bill Paxton, he's so fucking good in that. Him and was it Kevin Costner on the other side? Yeah, I think Kevin Costner was the Hatfield, and Bill Paxton was the McCoy. Didn't Bill? Was it one of them won an award for it? I think it was Costner.
Paxton was like, "Ooh, you bastard."
Ooh, you dirty motherfucker! You.
Costner had like a heart palpitation when Paxton died. That was Paxton getting his revenge from beyond the grave.
Probably.
Costner's like, "Oh God, Waterworld, Jesus."
No, but as sad as it would be, a part of me wants to believe that Paxton's last words were "Game over, man, game over."
I'm sure his family would like to think that as well. That's for sure, D.
Let's end this before we piss anybody else off. I'm Super DM64.
I'm Bill Worster, better known as Azubar.
And this was Samurai Month with Shaw. It's a podcast. Colonel Hogan, etc., all of the things. Bye.